In this video, we're going to be covering some aspects of the array modifier that I haven't talked about, and in this series we're going to be looking at the various modifiers. This is just an example of something that you could do using the modifier and applying it, and just to make a lot of work easier to make all of these squares, but then you have to separate them, and that's kind of what I want to go over a little bit today. So I have a new instance of Blender open here. I'm going to go into where it says Add Modifier, and I have my cube selected, of course. In doing this, I'm going to click on Array, and then I'm going to change the relative offset to 1.005, and that gives me just a little bit of gap here. And one of the reasons why I'm doing that is because when I apply it, I want to make sure that I don't merge this, but even more so for, because that's not checked, it's not going to anyway. With a physics simulation, if your edges overlap, then they'll be pushing each other away from each other and it'll kind of explode. And so I'm going to just give it a little bit of distance there. And I'm going to go ahead and just tell this to be 5. The more you add for applying physics simulations, the more complex time it's going to take to separate all the parts and to apply some of the settings. So I'm going to do another modifier that's also an array, and I'm going to have that one's down here actually. We're going to change this to 0. And then in the Y direction, I'm going to type in 1.005, so that now we have a nice little grid going there. I'm going to make this one 5 as well. And then I'm going to take those, I'm going to actually make a third one, and I could actually minimize those so I don't try to change those settings in here. Add modifier, I'm going to go down to array again. And I'm going to click on 0 for that direction. Here in the Z direction, I'm going to do 1.05. I think we did 1.005 on those. Yeah. Give it a little height. Those will settle when we do the simulation. And we'll go ahead and extend this up so that it's also 5 cubes. And so there we have just a nice 5x5 cube. So first of all, in doing this, I need to apply each of these objects. And once you apply, you end up with one large object. If I tab into here, I can see all the pieces. I can separate those out by hitting P on the keyboard. And then I want to say separate by loose parts, so that'll take each mesh that's joined together and separate them. I'm going to go ahead and tab out, and now each cube is separate. To select them all again, Z, B for box selects, there we go, and I'm going to do Z again. So now I have all of them selected. I could go over to the physics tab and I can say add active, and they're all active now. If I do something like calculate mass, and let's say that I decide to make these like plastic or plaster, and I say copy from active, so it won't change all of them, it'll change the first one, but then the one that I just changed, if I say copy from active, it'll put that setting to all of them. Also, I could do change shape here as well. Box would work perfectly fine for this. There is another aspect to be aware of though with the physics simulations, is that when things are small like this, they actually tend to not quite calculate the physics out correctly. It actually works much better if they're scaled up, in which case I'm going to do the calculate mass again, and I'm going to go ahead and do plaster. And let's do, doesn't really matter, but we'll do something lighter, so plastic, there we go. And then, just to kind of show you how this can work, because I have a problem where every single one of the centers of these objects is right down at that point. If I have a Let's just take another cube here and move it down a little bit. And let's do S. Make a little bit of a table for these to set on. So when I made my changes and stuff, I looked back at the density of these objects and it had a negative number that was huge, and so I went in and I just did calculate mass again, and I used a different object than what I had before, just to give it something a little bit more reasonable. And so now when I hit play, we see that everything just kind of falls over and goes, and all these little dots are representing the centers and stuff. And that's because it uses those centers to calculate out the mass. And so everything's leaning towards that one corner, and it creates some pretty weird things. So what we want to do is we want to recenter all those masses in the cubes. Fortunately for us, we can actually go to where it says Tools, Set Origin, and I can say Origin to Geometry, and now all those cubes are in their own places. If I hit play, it'll just sit there. I had a few that bobbed up and down. You can see like a couple of those cubes kind of bounced out. If I had given a little bit more space between the cubes, I think it wouldn't have done that so much. But what I'm going to do is, let's actually create something heavy to drop down into it and see what happens. So I'm going to do Shift A. I'm going to go ahead and add a UV sphere. I'm going to take this, I'm going to scale it up fairly large, and let's do, I'm going to pause this, go back to the beginning, and I'm going to go to my Physics tab. I'm going to add a active. I'm going to calculate mass based on, let's go ahead and do lead. There we go. And much higher number than the boxes, which is what I was aiming for. Let's also do change shape. Convex hull, it works pretty good for wrapping things close around it. But what we're going to do is just go to where it says mesh, and let's see what happens. Play, and kind of hit the corner there and knock things over. If you notice, like, those seem very slow because we scaled things up quite a bit. So I'm going to actually go and let's move that over a little bit. I'm going to go into the world settings, down to where we have gravity, speed. Let's just double the speed, and I'm going to go ahead and hit play. And there it seems to run a little bit smoother and faster, and there we go. That's all for this one.